My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and I learned early in life that some sisters aren't meant to be best friends. Sophia, my older sister by 3 years, made sure I understood that from the moment I could walk. Growing up, Sophia was always the star of the family. Straight A's, student body president, champion debater, she collected achievements like others collected stamps. Our parents' pride in her was matched only by their constant disappointment in me. Where Sophia excelled in public speaking, I preferred quiet research. While she dominated social circles, I spent hours in the library, studying patterns in law and business that others overlooked. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat at every family dinner, every parent-teacher conference, every holiday gathering. But what no one knew, what Sophia never noticed through her veil of superiority, was that I was building something bigger than high school accolades or college acceptance letters. It started during my junior year of high school. While Sophia was celebrating her acceptance to Harvard Law School, I was quietly launching my first legal consulting business from my bedroom. Using online forums and anonymous profiles, I began connecting struggling law firms with the resources they needed to succeed. By the time I graduated high school, I had built a network of over 50 law firms that relied on my research and strategies. Of course, none of them knew they were working with a teenager. "I just don't understand you, Alexandra," my mother sighed at my high school graduation. "Sophia's going to Harvard, and you're taking a gap year to figure things out." What is there to figure out? I didn't tell them that my gap year was actually the first phase of my business expansion plan. I didn't mention that the modest savings account they thought I had was actually approaching 7 figures. And I certainly didn't reveal that 3 of the top law firms in Boston had already hired my consulting company, not knowing they would soon be working with their star student's little sister. Sophia thrived at Harvard, of course. Every holiday break brought new stories of her success, new reasons for our parents to beam with pride. Meanwhile, I built my empire in silence. When my parents pressed me about college, I enrolled in online business courses, letting them believe I was at least trying, while I orchestrated mergers and acquisitions through my growing network of shell companies. By the time Sophie graduated from Harvard Law, I owned controlling interests in 7 major law firms across the East Coast. My company, Mitchell Strategic Solutions, had become the invisible force behind some of the most successful legal practices in the country. But on paper, I was just the quiet daughter who hadn't found her path yet. Everything changed the day Sophia joined Preston and Hayes, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. She didn't know that 6 months earlier, I had acquired it through a complex series of transactions. She walked into her first day of work, proud and confident, not realizing that her little sister was technically her boss. "You should see my office, Alex," she gloated during a family dinner. "Corner suite, full staff, partner track within 5 years. What are you doing these days? Still with that little consulting business?" I smiled and took a sip of wine. Something like that. The truth was, I was in the middle of the biggest acquisition of my career. Preston and Hayes was just the beginning. I was positioning myself to take over Blackwood International, the largest law firm conglomerate on the East Coast. The deal would make me one of the most powerful figures in the legal world, all before my 25th birthday. But Sophia couldn't help herself. She had to maintain her position as the family success story. That's why, when I met James Walker at a charity gala, she tried to stake her claim. "He's from one of Boston's oldest families," she told our mother, loud enough for me to hear. "And he's looking for someone successful, accomplished. Not really your scene, Alex." What Safia didn't know was that James had met me 3 months earlier in my role as the CEO of Mitchell Strategic Solutions. He had been representing Blackwood International in the acquisition negotiations, not realizing that the powerful, elusive CEO he was dealing with was the same woman he was falling in love with. When James proposed 6 months later, Safia was livid. She had been dropping hints about her own interest in him, only to watch her underachieving sister snag one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. "It doesn't make sense," I overheard her telling our mother. "She's nobody in this city. She barely has a real job. Something's not right about this." The wedding planning became her obsession. She insisted on being my maid of honor, not out of sisterly love, but because it gave her access to every detail, every guest list, every moment she could use to dig into my life. What she discovered must have shocked her: the inconsistencies in my story, the mysterious meetings, the connections that someone with a little consulting business shouldn't have. She spent months gathering evidence, planning her moment of triumph. She chose our wedding day to spring her trap, not realizing she was walking into one of her own. The ceremony was perfect. Boston's historic Trinity Church filled with the city's elite, judges, lawyers, business leaders. Many of them were there for James, the respected attorney from an old Boston family. None of them knew that the bride owned most of their law firms. But as the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, Safia rose from her seat beside me, a wicked smile playing on her lips. Little did she know, I had been waiting for this moment. After all, some sisters aren't meant to be best friends. They're meant to be lessons in humility. If anyone knows any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. Those traditional words hung in the air of Trinity Church for just a moment before Safia stood up, her blue maid of honor dress rustling as she stepped forward. The smirk on her face told me she had been waiting for this moment. "Actually," she announced, her voice carrying through the stunned silence, "I have something to say." Our mother gasped. James squeezed my hand, but I remained calm. After all, I had prepared for this possibility. "Before we continue this farce," Safia declared, pulling out a folder from behind her bouquet, "everyone here deserves to know the truth about Alexander Mitchell." She opened the folder with dramatic flair. "My sister has been lying to all of you. She's not the simple business consultant she claims to be. She's been operating under false pretenses, infiltrating law firms, manipulating her way into business deals." Murmurs rippled through the church. In the front row, our father's face had turned red with embarrassment. Our mother looked like she might faint. "I have proof," Safia continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Bank records showing suspicious transactions. Shell companies leading back to her. She's been deceiving everyone, including her fiancé." She turned to James. "Did you know your bride isn't who she claims to be? That while you've been working on the Blackwood International acquisition, she's been orchestrating it?" I finished for her, my voice calm. Safia faltered for a moment, but pressed on. "She's not qualified to run any of these companies. She never even went to law school." "You're right," I said, standing up in my wedding dress. "I never went to law school." I pulled out my phone and opened an email. I was too busy building an empire. With one tap, I sent the email I had prepared. Throughout the church, phones began buzzing as Boston's legal elite received the notification. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "as of this moment, Mitchell Strategic Solutions has completed its acquisition of Blackwood International. This merger makes us the largest legal services corporation in New England." Safia's face had gone pale. What are you talking about? I smiled. You're right about one thing, Sophia. I'm not a lawyer. I own the law firms, including Preston and Hayes, where you've been working for the past year. The folder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the church floor. That's impossible. You're lying. Am I? I turned to the assembled guests. Judge Harrison, would you like to confirm who owns controlling interest in your firm? Or perhaps Mr. Blackwood himself would care to explain who he's been negotiating with for the past 6 months. William Blackwood stood up from his pew. Everything she says is true. Alexandra Mitchell is the CEO of Mitchell Strategic Solutions. She's been the driving force behind the most significant legal industry consolidation in Boston's history. Sophia staggered backward. But you're my little sister. The underachiever. The disappointment. The disappointment who now owns the company where you work. I corrected her. Speaking of which, we should discuss your recent performance reviews. They're not very impressive. Our mother had found her voice. Alexandra, why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked. You were too busy comparing me to Sophia's Harvard degree to notice I was building something bigger than any law school could teach. I turned back to my sister. By the way, since you're so interested in exposing secrets, should we discuss what really happened with the Anderson case last month? The one where you claimed full credit for the settlement. Sophia's face went from pale to ashen. You wouldn't. The actual case files show that you barely contributed, I continued. In fact, your primary contribution was taking credit for work done by your junior associates, something that's become a pattern in your career. That's not true, she protested weakly. The records indicate otherwise, as do the complaints filed by your team, which have been sitting in HR, complaints I now own, by the way. James stepped forward, taking my hand. He was smiling. I should mention, he added, that as chief counsel for Blackwood International, I've known exactly who Alexandra is from the beginning. We met during the initial merger negotiations, long before that charity gala where you tried to warn me about her. Sophia looked around desperately, but she found no allies in the crowd. The city's most powerful legal minds were all nodding in recognition. They had all dealt with Mitchell Strategic Solutions, even if they hadn't known the owner's identity until now. So, I said, straightening my wedding dress, would you like to continue exposing secrets, dear sister? Or shall we proceed with my wedding? Sophia stood frozen, her carefully planned moment of triumph transformed into her own public humiliation. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "You never asked," I replied simply. "You were too busy looking down at me to notice I had risen above you." I turned to the minister. "Shall we continue?" But Sophia wasn't quite finished. As she sank back into her seat, she muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "This isn't over." I caught her eye and smiled. "Actually, it is. Check your email." As if on cue, her phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. An official notice of her immediate termination from Preston and Hayes, effective that moment. "You can't fire me," she hissed. "I'm not firing you," I corrected her. "The evidence of your misconduct and credit theft is firing you. I'm just the owner who approved the termination." The minister cleared his throat, clearly unsure how to proceed after such drama, but I simply nodded for him to continue. After all, this was still my wedding day, even if it had turned into something more. As I stood there, preparing to say my vows, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in one of the church's stained glass windows. I saw not the quiet, overlooked younger sister, but the powerful woman I had become. the woman who had built an empire while others underestimated her. And as I looked at Sophia, now sitting humiliated in her maid of honor dress, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success that no one saw coming. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a coronation. My parents sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that their underachieving daughter was actually one of the most powerful people in the room. As I said, "I do," I couldn't help but think how fitting it was that my wedding day had become the day I finally stepped out of the shadows. After all, what better way to start a new life than by revealing your true power? But even as I celebrated, I knew this was just the beginning. Sophia's words, "This isn't over," echoed in my mind. She had always been competitive, vindictive. She wouldn't take this humiliation lying down. What she didn't realize was that I was counting on that. The reception at the Boston Harbor Hotel should have been the perfect celebration. Instead, it became the battlefield for the next phase of Sophia's war against me. I was barely through my first dance with James when my phone buzzed with urgent messages. Sophia had gone straight from the church to the media, attempting to spin a story about corporate espionage and illegal business practices. Mitchell Strategic Solutions built through deception. Read the headline she had somehow managed to plant in an online business journal. Harvard graduate exposes sister's fraudulent empire. I smiled, showing the article to James. He raised an eyebrow. She really doesn't know when to quit, does she? No, I replied. She doesn't. But I was ready for this too. I nodded to Catherine, my chief of operations, who had been waiting discreetly by the bar. She immediately began making calls. Within an hour, every major news outlet in Boston received a comprehensive press package detailing Mitchell Strategic Solutions' completely legal rise to power, including all regulatory filings and compliance records. But Sophia wasn't done. As guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, she made her way through the crowd, whispering to key figures in Boston's legal community. "Did you know she's been recording your private conversations?" I overheard her telling Judge Harrison. Every law firm she acquired, she gathered dirt on the partners first. What she didn't realize was that each person she approached had already received a message from me, warning them about her desperate attempts to salvage her reputation. The breaking point came when she approached William Blackwood himself. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention, "I have evidence that my sister blackmailed you into this merger. She threatened to expose your offshore accounts." The room fell silent. Blackwood looked at her for a long moment, then laughed. "Miss Mitchell, or should I say, former Attorney Mitchell, your sister never blackmailed me. In fact, she was the one who helped me legitimize those accounts last year, saving my company millions in potential fines. That's why I agreed to the merger." Sophia's face turned red. But the documents I found were decoys," I interrupted, walking over. "I knew you were searching my office at Preston and Hayes. Every secret document you discovered was placed there specifically for you to find." "That's impossible," she stammered. "The banking records, the shell companies, all legal, all traceable, all part of legitimate business operations," I explained calmly. "Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself against exactly this kind of attack?" Our parents, who had been watching this exchange with increasing discomfort, finally approached. "Sophia," our father said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "enough." But she wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. "I still have proof. Recordings of your meetings, documents I copied. Actually, James interjected, you don't. As Chief Counsel of Blackwood International, I should inform you that removing confidential documents from Preston and Hayes constitutes a serious breach of contract, not to mention a violation of the Bar Association's ethics code. Sophia's face went pale. You wouldn't dare report me to the bar. I don't have to, I said softly. Your own actions today, attempting to disrupt a legal merger with false allegations, stealing confidential documents, trying to manipulate the media, those actions require me to report you. As the owner of Preston and Hayes, I have a legal obligation to do so. You're bluffing, she whispered, but her voice trembled. I pulled out my own phone and showed her the screen. A formal complaint to the Massachusetts Bar Association, ready to be filed. Last chance, Sophia. Walk away now. Leave Boston. Take the severance package I'm still willing to offer and start fresh somewhere else. You're destroying my career, she protested. No, our mother suddenly spoke up. You did that yourself. All these years, you were so busy proving you were better than Alexandra that you never noticed she had actually become better than you. Sophia looked around the room, finally seeing the truth. The powerful people she had tried to turn against me were all nodding in agreement. Her attempted power play had backfired completely. Fine, she spat. You win. You've always been playing a longer game than me, haven't you? The difference is, I was playing to win, I replied. You were just playing to make me lose. She turned and walked out of the reception, her blue dress disappearing into the Boston night. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Are you okay? James asked softly. I squeezed his hand. I am. It needed to end this way. Our parents approached, looking shell-shocked but proud. We had no idea, my father said. All these years. You saw what you expected to see, I replied. Sophia was the star. I was the disappointment. It made it easier to build something extraordinary while everyone was looking the other way. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of congratulations and celebrations. But now people were celebrating more than just my marriage. They were celebrating the emergence of a new power in Boston's legal world. Later that night, as James and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I received one final email from Sophia. You've won, she wrote. I'm moving to Chicago. But remember this, you taught me that appearances can be deceiving. One day when you least expect it, I'll have built something of my own, and then we'll see who the real winner is. I showed the email to James. He looked concerned, but I just smiled. Let her try, I said. Building something real takes more than ambition and revenge. It takes patience, strategy, and the wisdom to know that true success isn't about beating others. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. 10 years later, I stood in my office at the top of the Mitchell-Blackwood Tower, looking out over Boston's skyline. The empire I had built had grown beyond even my expectations. Sophia had tried to start several ventures in Chicago, but each had failed because she was still focused on competing with me, rather than creating something meaningful. Our parents had finally learned to see me for who I was, not who they had assumed I would be. And James had become not just my husband, but my true partner, in business and in life. On my desk sat a framed photo from our wedding, the moment right after I revealed the truth about Mitchell Strategic Solutions. In it, I'm standing tall in my wedding dress, power and confidence radiating from my posture. Sophia is in the background, her face a mask of shocked realization. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. Because while some people spend their lives trying to prove their worth through words and showmanship, others build empires in silence. My phone buzzed. Another major law firm was ready to join our network. As I prepared for the meeting, I thought about how far I'd come from that overlooked younger sister. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success so complete that it transcends revenge altogether. And sometimes the greatest triumph isn't in proving others wrong, but in proving yourself right. The empire I built wasn't just about showing up my sister or proving my worth to my parents. It was about creating something lasting, something meaningful, something that would outlive any family drama or personal vendetta. And as I sat down to sign the papers that would further expand my business empire, I couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, the quiet sister had roared the loudest, not through words, but through actions. Not through competition, but through creation. That's the thing about true power. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. And that's a lesson Sophia never learned.